Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the first show of 2021. For those of you who have gone on this journey with me over the past year, thank you, and thank you for returning. You already know that this show is about celebrating artists and their body of worth. Now, I've said this before, and I will say it again. I love artists. I love being on stage with other artists. I also love sitting in the audience and celebrating them from a distance. But I love it even more when that artist happens to be someone that I can call a friend. And that's our guest today, Barbara A. Malley. Now, Barbara is one of those people that I have known for so long that I don't remember when, where, and how we met. Barbara, do you remember how we met?
Well, I've only been in the city 12 years, so it couldn't be more than that. And it was probably at Don't Tell Mama. And then we went across the street and had dinner after whatever show we had just seen.
That's right. I want to begin today. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. Let's start there. How was your holiday this year?
Well, it wasn't anything like any others because I have a huge family. And usually I go on Christmas Eve to my brother's house and on Christmas Day to one of the nieces or nephews. And this year we didn't do anything on Christmas Eve or Christmas. I did something very minor with some girlfriends in my building. Okay, so on Thanksgiving we had dessert together in one of their apartments and then went home. And on Christmas Day, on New Year's Eve, 4 people met at midnight with a glass in their hand, and we had a drink and went home because everybody's really nervous now. They don't want to take any chances. So anyway, was not like ever before.
Excluding this New Year's Eve, which was a very unusual New Year's Eve for all of us, how do you normally spend New Year's Eve? I know how you spend Christmas with your family and everything, but is New Year's Eve a day of reveling or is it a day of introspection?
Well, probably not introspection. I do enough of that other times. But I actually belong to a book club, and what we've done for many years is on New Year's Eve, we take turns which house we go to. We have dinner, and we have the dinner early, and then we talk about a book, and then we put on Times Square and we watch it on TV. And of course, at midnight we do our reveling and have a couple of drinks, and then carefully drive home.
I like that. Okay. Now, are you one to make New Year's resolutions or not?
No, not really. I probably did many, many years ago, but when I stopped being religious, I think I also stopped being reformed.
We're going to get to that in a few moments because you have a religious past that some people may or may not know about. But before we get there, I want to ask you, and I begin all my shows with this question, and I'm heading there again in 2021. How are you doing really in the midst of all this?
Oh, it's very strange because one day is nothing like another. And like there could be some days where I have no idea what the hell I did all day. I got up at 6 like I always do. And I looked at my Facebook and my email. And then, before I knew it, it was 10 o'clock at night. And other days I get up and I really accomplish things. And I think, oh, I feel like me again. But you never know which is going to be. It's absolutely incredible.
And let me ask you, how are you keeping creative during this time? Because I know that you're a very creative person. We do see each other from time to time at open mics. You're well known and established there, in addition to your own shows that you do. So how are you keeping creative at this time?
Well, the best part of it is I am a participant in 10 different virtual open mics a month. So the creative part is thinking, what am I going to do? What song and what story goes with it, and so forth and so on. Because I didn't even know this about myself. but I'm a storyteller. I had people have tell me that. But when I sing a song, I introduce it some way, either where it came from, or the artist who wrote it, or what it means to my life. And then I get these remarks like, "Oh, Barbara, I love the stories you do before a song." So that's one creative part. The other is I'm working on a book that got put aside a little bit during the pandemic, but it's not an autobiography and it's not strictly a memoir. It's snippets of things that I've done and they're all in different style because it matches the mood. I just remember today, my husband and I owned a Mexican import shop for 5 years. So that's another whole story that I have to tell. So that's what I'm working on. I also have a list of things. Learn to become a voiceover artist because I'm not going to be doing cabaret anymore. Don't have the technology to do what you have to do it alone. But I got a setup. It's right beside me now.
Now, let's stop there for just a moment. When you say you're not going to be doing cabaret anymore.
I won't do whole individual shows. I will sing at cabarets. And what I like is, I don't know if you know that, but Parnell's on First Avenue. I went there with Teresa Fisher once. She was a very good friend of the woman who runs it, who's from Scotland. And so it was every other Monday night all last year. Then the creator, Polly McKee, had to go back to Scotland because her father was sick. Her father died while she was there, but so did the pandemic come, so she couldn't leave. So she did the open mic from Scotland. Scottish people joined in. And when she got back to New York, we had people from all different countries, Australia, Brazil, Panama. It's amazing. So it's a magnificent thing. And then if I really like how someone sings, I get their email address and then we become email friends. So that's very exciting.
Now, I've had the good fortune of seeing a few of your cabaret shows, and they're always entertaining, great stories, and you tie it all together. I want to ask you, do you get the same satisfaction performing at an open mic doing one song as opposed to doing an entire evening?
Definitely not, but that's only during the pandemic. When I was doing open mics at Parnell's, for example, I loved it. In fact, Eric Jacobs was the featured singer the first night I came. And a lot of people from Don't Tell Mama, Ricky and people have come to hear him. So I have been the featured singer a few times. The featured singer sings 6 songs. Then there's an hour of open mic. Then the featured singer sings another 6 songs. And then they pay you $100 and give you a free dinner and a drink. So that's kind of nice. And in between, it's nice people that you mingling with. So I like that. I'm going to search for more of those because that was really nice. You make you a little bit of money, but you're having fun. Oh, and one night, I didn't know that you have to advertise it and you're supposed to bring 15 guests. And I didn't know that. So the first time I didn't do it. And the woman in charge said, "Do you know that people?" Yeah. Okay, we got 8. I'm supposed to have 15. So they gave me $50 and they still gave me the dinner and the drink. But the last time I already had my 15 and in walked 4 young women, one of them my niece, the other 3 her friends who were all about to start college, and they came to surprise me from New Jersey. Wow. And another night, my nephew and his wife from Florida really surprised me. I said, "Oh my God." And here they were. So I have fun doing that.
Now, you've become a fixture in the cabaret community, and there may be some people out there who don't know who you are, and we're going to introduce them to you today. But for those, what is the biggest surprise that you've had performing either in an open mic situation or in your own show from a complete stranger coming in to see you perform, or perhaps someone that's not a complete stranger, but you were surprised to find them in your audience?
A couple of things were going through my mind at once. One of them was my 3rd show was called I Remember Brooklyn. And Sydney put a sign outside Don't Tell Mama.
Sydney Meyer.
People came in who had never been to Don't Tell Mama. They came because it was about Brooklyn. And I remember one of them after she said to me, "You forgot about Charlotte Roosters when you were, something like that." So, and then we had the Brooklyn Dodgers and all that. That was a real nice one because they had no idea who I was. Let me see what other one could have been like that. Well, this wasn't really a guest, but this was fun. Barry Kleinblatt was my director. And Barry, I didn't know then that Barry had a plan. When he got a new person, he got to know everything about them. And then he talked them into doing a show. And of course, I told him I had been a nun, and he asked me how many lesbians were in the convent, and he asked me all these different questions. And then he said one night, "Well, we have to do a show." And I said, "Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't do that." Well, little by little, he convinced me. And of course, it was a very great success. But the big thing was he was trying to think of a clever name for the show. And since my name was Sister Therese, one of the names was the Therese Syndrome. And another one was, since I left the convent, was Day in, Day out. Well, he told that to his good friend, whose name I'm forgetting. It's terrible. He's a great musician. And he said, no. It has to be Out of Order. And that was the name of the show, Out of Order.
I like
But
that.
I realized later, that's me. My whole life, I've been out of order. So it was a perfect name.
Let's go back and tell everyone a little bit about your parents, because your parents were in the business.
Yes, and I used them in one show, which was called "Oh My God, Am I a Diva?"
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I said, "How do you become a diva?" And I said, "Well, you have to have diva genes." Now, my mother and father both grew up in the village. When my mother was 14, she joined the Greenwich Village Players, which was run by St. Joseph's Church, which was a pretty well-known church in the village. And that night, she met my 20-year-old father, who was a serious actor. So, and her father sang every Saturday night in vaudeville. And also, remember those films you'd see with a song that the whole audience could sing and had the bouncing ball?
Bouncing ball, yes.
My grandfather was the voice behind the screen, actually leading the singing.
Wow.
And his name was George Hendrickson. And he was a poor man, there's a whole story about that. But anyway, everybody in the family.
A lot of people may not realize this, but those people that were behind the curtain with the bouncing ball, when the curtain would go up and they would be revealed to the audience would throw money at their feet.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Because, see, I didn't know my grandfather when he was doing that, but that's very interesting. And then my uncle, the only bachelor in the family, he was my godfather. He had a lovely singing voice. And he also was, he was a writer, and he not a professional, except he did publish one story that he wrote. But he and I were very close, and he had me get a notebook called Poems, Plays, and Something or Other by Barb and Malley. And then I'd write something, and then he would teach me how to write better. And then we would sing together. So my grandfather and my uncle were my pals. And my mother and I, oh yeah, this is even better. I would come home from work, and my mother would be ironing. So I would take the clothes, and I'd fold them and get them into the right place. And then she'd say, "I don't have to start supper for half an hour. Let's go down the basement and sing." And we go down, and we put on the wind-up Victrola, and we'd sing songs from the 20s or whatever it was. And then she and my father used to go to Roseland every Friday night to learn dancing. So my mother would teach me the one-step and the two-step. And so we were pals. So I should have gotten into show business early, but I never did. I was never even in a play in high school or anything. And it was just.
But I did read that you were asked to direct a play when you were in high school.
Oh, no, in eighth grade.
Oh, in eighth grade. Well,
in
in high school.
We had this nun who, she was interesting too. She took us down to the auditorium once a week to teach us square dancing. But anyway, she decided, she had the script, and she gave it to me and said, "Take the kids downstairs and direct the play." I was 13. I didn't know what thing. I have no idea what, but I just did it. I said, "Oh, well, I'm in charge." That was kind of funny. But that was I did not in high school at all or college, because I was in so many other organizations. The one thing I did all my life from 12 on was belong to church choir or the glee club in college. But I never had any thought that I was going to do anything with it. It seems strange. But let's say 30, 40 years later, when I went to some high school reunion, somebody said, "Oh, you're finally doing everything you always want to do." I never even knew I wanted to do it. It's kind of funny.
So it wasn't a bug with you. I mean, some people have that bug that gnaws at them that they have to go after this, and that was not your plan. Now, I want to ask you, I know that you performed a lot, with the church choir and all of that. But was your household a very religious household?
No, not really. They were faithful Catholics. Okay. Now, we kids were more religious in a way, because the nuns would say, "Now, in May, you have to make an altar in your house for the Blessed Virgin Mary." And my father, and the whole family has to kneel down and say the rosary. My parents were not interested in doing that. So we didn't do that. They were faithful. They obeyed the rules of Catholicism. But when I was a very little girl, talking about the bug, my father, who grew up in a cold water flat on Bleecker Street, his father was stone deaf. He never had a conversation with his father because you had to yell for him to hear. His mother and her sister were maids in Charles Pratt's house. And his sister married the butler. So all of that happened. But my daddy decided he didn't want to be an Irish peasant. He wanted to be an American, he wouldn't say capitalist, professional. Okay. So starting at age 12, he had jobs so that he could put himself through college and law school. But he decided my older sister would be a good speaker, and he taught her oratory, and she won all kinds of awards for that. Then he decided I had a singing voice, so every time we had company, I had to stand up in the living room and sing a song. And I'd go, "Oh, Daddy, I can't do that," but I had to. And then when I was 12, my church had a contest. It was supposed to be I don't know, a showbiz concert, whatever. I think it was all singing. And this boy that I knew who was a year older than I, we were both in choir, George Fink, his name was. George said, "Well, Barbara, we're both in choir. We should sing a duet." So we sang Some Sunday Morning. You know that song? Some Sunday morning, we'll walk down the aisle. Okay. And we won third prize. And one of my shows, I tell that story, and I say, and then, and suddenly I knew, this is what I've been looking for. Applause, applause. And from that, so that was kind of.
I want to ask you, and this may seem like an odd, weird question or a personal question to ask you, but I know that eventually you became a nun.
Yes.
Did you date in high school? Did you?
Yes, I was always in love with somebody. But, you know, when you're 12, 13, 14, it lasts about a year, and then you both get tired of each other or something. You get another boy. But somebody just the other day, a good friend of mine said, "Barbara, how did you ever become a nun?" Because when I met my high school kids for a 25th, my high school classmates for 25th, they all said, "You're nothing like you were in high school." Oh, in high school, I was very, very, very religious. And I was very much, I don't know what word I want to call it, but I was the president of my class for 3 out of 4 years. And I did all these kind of things. I never did anything with acting or singing. That's what's so funny. But
I grew up in a household on both sides of my parents' family.
Yeah.
My paternal and maternal grandparents were religious on both sides.
Okay.
Neither one of my parents were very religious, but I grew up, funny thing, I grew up next door to a church. And so every Sunday morning got up. I grew up in the Methodist church. I would get up, I would go to church. And, and now I live across the street from 2 churches. So I've always been surrounded by churches. But when you were, let's say, 14, 15 years old, and you were religious, and you said that you didn't live in a religious household, what was it that pulled you towards the religion?
Okay, that probably is answered by who am I with everything that I do. Whatever I do, I get so into it, so intensely into it, that I have to become not the best, but one of the best. Whether it's bowling. Yeah, I used to go bowling when I was 16. My girlfriend and I went every single day after school. And in those days, people weren't in bowling alleys, that much in the afternoon. So Pat Petito, who was the manager, would bowl with us and say, "Okay, see what I just did? See if you can do it." And that's the way I was with everything I did. So I went to Catholic grammar school, high school, college, and graduate school. But graduate school I was a nun by then. So I would do something. This is what I figured out. I would do something that I really like teaching English. 10, 11, 12 years. And then we heard about learning disabilities. And I said, "Oh, I think I'll take a few classes." Well, now I'm in it. I stay and I get a master's in special ed. So that I do that for a lot of years. And then one day I say, the parents of these kids that have learning problems, they really need therapy. So that I went back to school and became a psychologist. But it always seemed to me to just make sense. It didn't seem to me like it was crazy.
You just went for it.
But every 2 years, I would take singing lessons. I'd do it for 2 years, and then I did nothing with it. I did.
Now, getting back to that decision in your life, when you said, I've made up my mind, I'm going to become a nun.
Okay.
What was the response from your parents at that point?
My mother said, I don't mind if you do this as long as you come home. If this is a good story, as long as you come home if you don't like it. Well, I was in for about 6 months, and I had fallen in love with Harry Belafonte when I was 15. And so my mother sent a letter, and she's telling news of the family, and then she says, "You can come home now. Harry Belafonte just got a divorce." So my mother was wonderful. She was
Right.
just great. My father was furious because he wanted me to become the president of a corporation. And he said, "Oh, and we had to have a dowry, which was $1,000. However, it turned out if you had college education, you didn't have it. They considered you had made your contribution." So he said he would never come to see me and so forth. My mother said, "Don't worry, he'll get over it." So he did get over it. And then when I left the convent, he was embarrassed. What was he going to tell the priest? What was he going to tell people? And I had applied for a job at Harcourt Brace as an editor because I was an English major.
Mhm.
And the guy there knew right away from my resume that I had been a nun. And he said, people are going to realize that you're a nun. They're going to ask you why you left. And you should say, like a divorce, it's very complex. So I told my father, he said, well, you have to say that. And we got over it. But why I became
The
a nun.
order that you were part of, Barbara. Was there a strict dress code? Did you dress as a nun? Was
Oh,
there?
yes. Oh, yes. Uh, you probably can't see this. Can you see this?
Yes.
Well, there's two pictures of me there. This one is a fake one, but up there, it's me as a nun. Oh, wait, it's down the bottom. That's the habit I have.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Yes.
Okay. I figured out much later. See, I always wanted to get married. I always was attracted to boys. But every place I went, nuns or priests said I must have a vocation. Well, I realize now what they did. They chose the people who were leaders, who were very religious. I went to mass every day from 7th grade on. So so did some other people, but
Mhm.
that's what it was. And in what my show called Out of Order, we talked about how girls who were told you should be a nun, we were saying, is it really a call? Can you hear it? Do you have to say yes? You know, we because that it's like kids believe in Santa Claus. Well, we
Well, did
believe
you
that there
feel
was.
that that you were called to be a nun?
No, I think what happened was. Now I'll give you. No, this is another step in change.
Mm-hmm.
In my college was wonderful, and both the nuns, the priests, and the lay faculty. The lay faculty were scholars, and whether they were psychologists or they taught history or language or whatever, they knew journals, intellectual journals from all over the world. So we come into sophomore religion class, and Father Moriarty, who was this gorgeous priest, walked in and he said, "There was no Garden of Eden, there was no apple." And we all went, "Oh!" But that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my knowing, oh, wait a minute. I think I have to use reason to decide what I think. And I did do that until senior year when other friends who are becoming nuns and this beautiful poetry and it got to be this romantic, wonderful, gorgeous thing. You're the bride of Christ, all of that. And so I said yes, and I did it.
And what was your, for lack of a better word, indoctrination, your training into becoming a nun?
Oh, well, after college, about a month later, you go to what's called the novitiate. So you're a novice.
Mhm.
And you're there for 2.5 years learning how to be a nun, learning the prayers, learning meditation, learning all of that thing. And then after that, you made your first vows. And when that thing you saw me in was what the novice wears. When you become a real nun, you come in a wedding dress, and then you go into a room. They cut off some of your hair, not all your hair, but just make it
Mhm.
shorter. And then they give you the habit. And now you have a name, Sister Therese, blah 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 blah. Then you go to another place, which is called the House of Studies. And there, because we were going to be teachers, we had 2.5 years there. We got our master's degree at Catholic University in Washington. We took religious classes during the summer and education classes we fit in. So now we were a teaching nun. And now we got our first assignment. And my first assignment was to teach 11th grade English, and every nun taught one section of religion. And the topic was the commandments. And this is where I changed. I said, I'm not going to teach them the way we were taught. Everything was a sin, everything was guilt, especially about sex. So I went around. By the way, I had never heard the word sex. Nobody said sex in my day. You talk about boyfriends or being in love, but I don't think I ever heard the word sex until I was 30 or something. But I went to the public library and I got a book called Sex on the College Campus. And I thought this sounded kind of nice. And then there was a movement in the Catholic Church of married couples who were trying to teach teenagers about love and the good ways to be healthy, and all that sort of stuff. And they gave this program to us nuns to get our approval to teach it in the school, but I memorized it and I taught it in my religion class. And now I was going crazy. I wanted sex. So that was the beginning of my change. And by then
yes, I mean, at that time, what you were doing, was that considered controversial? And did you run into any roadblocks from other people because you were doing this?
I mean, what I did in my classroom?
When you were teaching a course?
Well, I don't think the kids ever told anybody. I'm sure that happened because I should have gotten in trouble. I mean, I
want to play a little game with you for just a moment before we move on.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to mention a few famous nuns, and I want you to tell me which one you were the closest to. Would that be Debbie Reynolds in The Singing Nun, or would that be Deborah Carr in Black Narcissus, or Audrey Hepburn in The Nun Story, or Sally Field in Flying Nun, or Maria in The Sound of Music?
Probably Maria. Most of the others now sound soupy to me.
Yes.
But I'll tell you who my real favorite was. Ingrid Bergman in The Bells of St. Mary's.
Yes.
And she always had this ongoing battle with Father so-and-so, Father O'Malley, who was, but years later when I was more sophisticated, I thought, there was something, it's never shown, but they were really in love, I think. And then in that same show, Out of Order, I mentioned that I loved Ingrid Bergman as the nun, but I also loved her even more in Casablanca.
Well, of course, I mentioned all of these iconic characters from these films because they've all given all of us, even Sister Bertrell, a vision and an idea of what it is like in the convent and everything. Were any of those accurate as far as you were concerned?
This is really funny because you mentioned the singing nun. And just this morning, I thought of the singing nun. I don't know if you know what happened to her, that woman who played that part. Eventually, she was a lesbian and she had, I think they either both committed suicide or one of them did. It was a horrible rest of their life. And yet that probably was closer to reality. The fact of the struggle and wanting to get away from the thing you thought you believed in. I think the flying nun was that was just that was kind of silly.
Although you fly from outside of a pandemic, you're flying from event to event.
Yeah, that's right. The Sound of Music was closer. I mean, what are you going to do with the problem like Maria? That could be pretty accurate, I think.
Now, one thing that I've always wondered, and perhaps you can clarify this for all of us, is being a nun, are you able to express your own individuality, or are you asked pretty much to conform to what they want you to be?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is the order that I belonged to was quite different from diocesan nuns. St. Ignatius Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, wrote Our Rule. And we sort of thought of ourselves as female Jesuits. In the sense that, for example, they wouldn't take anybody to join right after high school where all the local ones would. You had to be either a college graduate or you had to at least be out of high school and working for 2 years. So then you were more mature. And I think, there certainly was a strict rule and you had to obey the rule. And you could get not demerits, but you could get that kind of, looked down at if you were always breaking rules. But we definitely were encouraged, as the Jesuits were, to become as educated as we could. And when the Pope died, the Pope that had been there for many years, and then John the 23rd came, and John the 23rd was kind of different. And we were definitely in the leading group of the people who was with him and hoping that the vow of celibacy would be gone, which it never was. But let me see. Certainly nobody came and recorded my class or anything. Nobody asked me what I was doing. I'm sure if some girls had thought what I did was wrong and had told their mothers, and their mothers would go up and complain, probably something would happen. I'd be told, don't teach that again. But it never happened. Never happened. So, yeah. Oh, I do remember one time I was teaching my English class, and there was an article in Time magazine or one of those about, it was called A Crisis of Faith. And it was talking about how people are questioning religion. And I said that, and a kid raised her hand and said, I think you're the one who's having a crisis of faith.
Well, let's
was right.
talk about your crisis of faith. I'm going to take you down a path that you have actually shared with me over dinner some time ago. You started in your 30s learning about sex and reading about it and all of that.
Loving it.
And loving it.
Yeah.
And it happens in your 30s, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. But when did this dichotomy start struggling within you that perhaps this isn't where I need to be?
Well, that's when it started. What happened was I taught in the elementary school for 3 years. I was changed to the high school. Now when I would take the girl, I took what's the film? Oh, anyway, one of those very sexy films. I took my English class to see it because it was a prominent film. So it was coming into me. And then I did share with another nun that she was a lesbian and had been a lesbian since she was 13. And she had been for years in love with this other person. And they both entered the convent and told each other they could never touch each other again, because now they were taking vows of chastity. Because chastity means a lot more than celibacy. Celibacy means you won't do sex. Chastity means you wouldn't even think about it. That would be a sin. So I started not going to communion in the morning because I had these sins of wanting sex. And then I guess I asked a priest, and he'd ask me sort of questions that I'd say, I don't even know what that means. So I had to learn about some things. It was because we, in our age, we weren't taught that. Even my baby sister, who was 14 years younger, when she was in 6th grade, the Catholic school wrote a letter to the parents saying, we're going to start sex education now at 6th grade. And my mother said, I don't know if they should do that without asking us. You'll be able to do it to your kids, but my mother was born in 1905. She said, but for us, that seems, hard. But then, a few years later, after I left the convent, I was working at my office, and my mother called me one day, and she said, I just read an article on the various kinds of birth control. And now I'm sure, and she named my sister, my baby sister, and her boyfriend. I'm sure they're using something. I hope they're using the right thing. And I thought, wow, that's a change in my mother, that she even said that. So
Really progressing. Now, I know that you moved beyond being a nun eventually, and we'll talk about that for a moment. But I want to ask you, before we move on, and I probably already know the answer to this, but having gone through that period of your life, and even looking back now, this many years later, do you think that the restrictions and constrictions that are on priests and nuns should be antiquated or let go of, or what do you think?
Well,
where do you stand on that?
Two separate questions. Priests and nuns are two separate questions. First of all, there's the kind of priests that most people know. They are called secular priests. They do not have a vow of chastity. They can take whatever courses they want. They can go wherever they want. It's like a minister, except they have the vow of celibacy. But the rest of it, yes, I think it's a ridiculous rule. I think it hurt many, many men. Not many men are really bound to be celibate. Maybe women a little bit more. Maybe not now, but certainly 50 years ago, or 40 or 30, whatever. So I think it's horrible, and that should have happened. And in fact, when the Pope died, the priests had been thinking it was going to happen, and then it never happened. So for the nuns and for the priests that belong to an order, they've chosen the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They have vowed. And when I was in college, there was a professor who was a bachelor, and we finally found out. When you're in the seminary, you go steps, and one step is deacon, and that's just before priest. And he decided to leave when he was a deacon. And then he had to promise forever to do one of the following: either say the divine office every day or keep the vow of celibacy. Now, he chose to keep the vow of celibacy. That was his choice. But it could be they just had to say the office every day, which would have been much easier. But anyway, that's what he chose. Maybe he really didn't want sex for some reason. So I think now, should there be, back in Rome, there were Vestal virgins. So in the history of the world, there has been some religious connection with virginity. So do I? No, I don't. I mean, I left more for sex than for anything else. But
now,
also probably for freedom.
Now, your husband,
Yeah.
did you meet your husband while you were still a nun?
No,
Or,
no, there was some like that, but that didn't happen to me. What happened was I wanted to meet men, and I found out that there was an organization called Bearings for reestablishment, kind of fancy. An ex-priest founded it. It was to help ex-nuns and priests. By the way, there were thousands all over the world that were leaving in the 60s. And so he wanted to help people get jobs, apartments, and social life. So I started going. That's where I met people. And after a while, they decided that the woman who was the social chairman was behind the times. So they asked me to be the social chairman. So then I became the social chairman. And Alan, who was my husband, who is now 95 years old, by the way. I just talked to him on the phone the other day. We have remained friends, but I divorced him because it just wasn't the right thing for me. And it took him a while, but just a few years ago, he said to me, I think we ex-nuns and priests were so much in a hurry to get married that we didn't know anything about it. And
he was a priest himself?
Pardon?
Your husband was also a priest or not?
Yes, he was a priest.
Wow.
Yes, and so, well, that's who we were meeting in this thing, Bearings. We were meeting priests, right? Ex-priests and ex-nuns. I did meet other guys too, because I went to other things where there's a church that has a social thing, or well, not necessarily church, whatever. Yeah, and actually,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, there were probably a lot of people who did know each other when one was a parish priest and one was a nun. There was some like that, but I don't think too many were. There was also a Jesuit had an apartment, and in his apartment he had an altar where he could perform a marriage ceremony. Now, this was because my husband was lucky. He belonged to a diocese where they gave him complete freedom from everything, but some didn't, and they could not marry. So he did a civil ceremony, but he said mass while he did it, and so their parents thought that they were doing the legal thing of the church, but they really weren't. And so then they married, and they some of them lived like priests for their whole life. They were married, they had children, but they said mass on the dining room table every Sunday. I mean, everybody was different what they did with it, but with me it was just I wanted life, and all of a sudden I was Barbara again.
Now, did you actually date while you were a nun, or did that?
No. Oh no!
Oh, it all came afterwards.
Oh yeah! Oh no! Oh no! That would have been a mortal sin.
I know that.
No.
I know
well,
that.
I do remember I'd sit in chapel, not going to communion, of course. I'm having these sexy thoughts, and I remember thinking,
Barbara, I love you so much more. I just love you.
How can they all be here and not realize that that guy up there is a man? I did have a dream where the priest would come. I mean, a purposeful dream. When the priest would come to give us a retreat, we'd have a retreat for say 3 days once a year, and it was a little apartment for the priest, and you had to. Some nun had to be assigned to bring him his meals because he would eat in there. And I remember thinking, it would be so good if we could have sex while I'm there, but that was just in my head. That never happened. That never happened. I haven't told that to too many people.
Oh my! But now you told the whole world.
I know. That's all right. Well,
that's great. But what was the deciding factor for you when you finally said, "I am leaving. I'm no longer going to be a nun"? And was it an easy breakaway, or was it gradual for you?
Okay, here's the way it was. I told the superior that I had a lot of anxiety and I would like to see a therapist. So she said, well, Father so-and-so, he's a psychologist in Boston College. You could see him, and he was a handsome guy. And I said to my friend, another nun, I said, if I were to see him, we'd probably both leave and we'd probably get married. Well, you know what? Years later, she left to marry him. But anyway, that didn't happen. All right. So then they decided that I was very unhappy where I was. And that's a whole nother story. I had a horrible, it was like a medieval convent. And so they decided to send me back to New York, and I was going to teach at the College of New Rochelle. But they gave me the name of a psychiatrist at St. Vincent's Hospital. I went to him in April. I left the convent 3 months later because he said, well, but it was not a complete leave. He knew the rules and I didn't. He said, you don't have to abruptly leave. Take a year's leave of absence. And during that year, you can either go back to the convent, you can ask for an extension, or you can just say, no, I changed my mind, you know. So July, I saw him in April. I left in July. I left exactly to the day, 12 years from the day I entered.
Wow.
July 5th, 1968.
And what was the reaction from your parents when you told them that you were going to be leaving that?
Well, my mother was fine, just like she had said in the beginning. You can leave now. Harry Belafonte just got divorced. My father was embarrassed. See, when I told them originally that I was going to enter, my father said, don't tell anybody because you may change your mind. The next day, he told his barber and the pastor of our church.
That's the way it goes.
Well, Irish, you know, the oldest Irish kid usually is supposed to become a nun or a priest. So I think he was proud in a way, but I was still foiling his plans because he wanted me to become, you know, CEO of a company or something. So within 3 months, I wasn't ready. I was a little scared to say the final thing. But then I started dating people that I liked, and then I just knew I don't ever want to go back. So, and I wanted to have 2 children before I was 40, and I never had any. So that's another whole thing. Before 40 was because of Down syndrome, because that was a scare at that time. So then when I know, I did another thing, which was breaking the rules. Whenever a nun left, and it happens, she was never mentioned again. Her things just disappeared. Her shelf was empty where her name used to be. And I remember this one, she used to direct our plays, and Reverend Mother's assistant said to me, "Sister, will you direct the play?" And I said, yes, as if I had any choice, you know. So after that, I was directed all the plays. Then I started being the star. I don't know why, but they would do that. So that was coming out of me. But anyway, with a certain amount of months, I knew that I was never. Oh, I know. The first night home, I sat in the living room of my parents' home and saw Johnny Carson for the first time. This is 1968. And my sister and her boyfriend were sitting on the sofa. And I said in my head, my name is Barbara Malley. In other words, it's not Sister Therese anymore. So then I just knew I was never going back.
And how long after that did you marry your husband?
It was July 68. We got married in April 1970. So a year and a half.
And you were married for how long?
10 years.
Okay.
And we had some problems, and he was not able to even reveal himself to a therapist. And then I was going away. Now I was starting my psychology degree, and I was going away for the whole summer. And he promised me he would do 2 things. One was go to see the therapist alone, because the therapist said, Barb is affectively developed, and you're intellectually developed, and so we can't talk. I have to get to know you better. And he promised to go, and he never did. And then he promised me something else that he never did. So when I came home, I said, I want a separation.
Now, I want to talk before we run out of time, and we've got to get this in, about your performing career.
Yes.
Earlier that you did continue throughout your life to have singing lessons. But what was the moment, or how did everything turn around where this started happening for you?
Okay. I just realized why. In my I had become a Unitarian. And in my church, this man, Elof Carlson, had started a book club. And we met at a different person's house each time. But we were all people who could perform in some way. And I was at that time taking jazz piano lessons. So I played the piano. And then I said, oh, wait, there's a club over on that street over there where they have open mic every Friday night. So I started going there. And then one of the women was a great performer. And I said, how did you learn? She said, oh, HB Studio in the Village. Well, by now I was a psychologist, and I didn't have office hours on Friday. So every Friday I drove into HB Studio, and I took singing and acting lessons. Then I found out Weiss Barron had voiceover and on-camera commercial. So I went there every Monday night. And then So agents and managers came for a whole weekend, watched us perform, and one signed me. And so I said, well, that's it. I sold my house and came to the city. But I had always planned to retire to the city.
Now, you were living where at the time?
I was living in Suffolk County, Long Island.
Okay.
That's from, or our whole marriage was
Yeah.
there. And then even after I divorced Alan, I stayed there because I was teaching in Port Jefferson. And I wanted to get my 20 years in to get my pension. But now I became a psychologist, so I had that. And that was it. It was just.
Now, when the agent came in, they saw you and they signed you. Did things start happening immediately for you, or was it a slow process?
Oh, no, it happened immediately. And here's the strange thing. The first one was, I remember I had never been in a play. So there was an ad for audition for a play called It's About Forgiveness. Great show. I'm in heaven. My husband is in hell because he murdered me by poisoning me. He's allowed to come up to heaven and beg for forgiveness. And after and I always play a Jewish, by the way. So it says, when I kill you, to call, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I said no, I wasn't going to give him forgiveness. So he was leaving. And as he's leaving, I say, I got some coffee. And he says, how about arugula? And I said, this is heaven, not Babylon. It was just, anyway, it was the first place I ever tried for it. I got the part. And so that was it. And then I went to a class where you meet not agents, casting directors. And they made everybody go around the room and say what they wanted to get out of this. And he said, Barb was the most marketable person in the room because at my age, the competition was much less. And how old was I by then? Well, I came to the city when I was 74. So I was about 75. But as you know, I'm 86 now, and I don't look it, and that's just luck.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot of jobs. Nobody ever knew I was 80 until I revealed it with Ricky Ritzel in one of my shows. But that was just, and I know, I went to one audition, and the guy said, Barbara, this isn't for you. This is for an 80-year-old woman. And I said, Don, I'm 80. After that, he never called me in except for old lady parts. So that wasn't so good. But most people now, they don't care. They don't care. They just care they're not allowed to ask your age. They ask, what age do you play?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say early 60s to early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. Anyway, so I'm often a Jewish grandmother. And
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just because I grew up in Brooklyn with Jewish girlfriends. And one of them had a grandmother who was a Russian Jew who spoke in Yiddish. And I remembered the accent, and that's why I got the parts. It was, I don't even know how I could remember it for all those years, but it gets incorporated into you somehow.
And then, of course, through all of that, you got very established in the cabaret community. How did you, I know that you started out with the open mics and everything, but how did you dip your toes in the water, so to speak?
By going to 92nd Street Y and taking Colette Black's classes.
Oh, I love her. I loved her.
So I did a whole year with Colette and who was it? David Brunetti was my piano player. They both liked what I was doing, so they kept urging me to do a show. So I did one show, and next year I took another show with Colette. But then after my first show, I auditioned for this wonderful summer in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Now that was Perry Mansfield Performing Arts Center. And we had 6 teachers, Barry Kleinwood and David Gain, Andrea Marcovici and Shelley Markham, Chris Denny and Karen Mason. We had 7.5 hours of class a day. At the end of the week, we put on a show. And then Barry had told me, now don't leave the people you're working with. But after a couple of times, he was at a show that I was at, and I said, Barry, we should do something together. And he said, well, you want to do a show about Brooklyn? And then we did Brooklyn. And so that's how it all happened. It was all very lucky. Now, I hope that it happens with voiceover because I have to meet all new people.
Well, based on everything that you've told me so far, I think the doors are just going to completely open for you. I believe that. I truly do. Now, I want to go back to Colette for just a moment. She was just such a wonderful person. Were you working with her around the time of her passing, or?
Yeah, well, the reason I got Barry for the Brooklyn show was I had a Brooklyn show all picked out, a date and all that. And David Brunetti said to me, oh, Barbara, I'm booked that time. I can't do it. Why don't you see if David Gaines is available? And then Colette got cancer then. That was her first time.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, I can't do this show. And then as you know, several years later it came back, and that's
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, I loved Colette, and
Now,
Colette for a while she was working at 53 Above, and so she and I did a little bit of work together with Jason Ellis. But
mhm.
anyway, that was very very sad, very sad.
Now with yeah, I loved her. I mean, she did lighting for me many years
Oh
ago.
yeah, she was very talented.
Doing that, very talented. Um, so your first full cabaret show that was directed by Barry Clybourne.
No,
And
no, no. He was the third and fourth. The
okay,
first two were Colette Black and David Brunetti.
so you did a full show with them.
Oh yeah, one was
And what,
called Life Is, because I didn't know what else you should call a show, and I figured that's what cabarets were about. It was probably okay. The second was called You Must Remember This. That
well,
was a
let's
better
go
one.
back to the first one for just a moment. Where did you open the show?
Don't Tell Mama,
Okay.
because that's really where Colette always started, because then she was very involved with. And that I think we did. Oh, I did that one only once. My second show I did twice. The third show, Sydney loved it so much. That's the one about the convent that
Hmm.
I did it 9 times. He wanted me to do it once a month, and I said, "How many people know me? I don't know if I could do that." And then the Brooklyn one went over because it was Brooklyn, and it was a good show. It was a very good show.
Going back to the first show, how did you find your audience, or how did the audience find you?
Well, Colette knew how to do that because she taught all those classes at 92nd Street Y. And she did have me practice in Broadway. What's that one? It's the same place where 53 Above is. Broadway,
Broadway Baby.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we did the first couple there, and she had an entree. She used to take us also to some open mics on some other nights, just so people would get to know us. But once I had done 2 things with Barry, everybody knew me.
So how long has it been now that you've been doing cabaret?
My first one was in 2010, so it's 10 years.
10 years. So since you first started, obviously you're more well-known in the cabaret community. More people know you. And in addition to all of that, you're doing the theater work and the film work that you're doing. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Congratulations on that.
And how about Bubbe?
And
like
Goldie
Bubbe
with the commercials.
But the Bubbe one, that is, I did 3 one year, 3 the next year, and 1 the next year. That is the people who pay for it are the American Friends of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which was founded by Freud and Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, and their commercials were boring, and they weren't getting very many contributions. So they said, everybody has a Bubbe. We have to have a Bubbe, and we'll make it funny. And I auditioned. There were 12 auditions. The others were all Jewish, and I got the part because I had the Yiddish, what do you call it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I know
It was
what you mean.
so I pay for your bar mitzvah. So what am I now? Chopped liver.
Yeah.
That kind of, what do you call that? I forget what you call that. But anyway, that.
Dialect?
No, it's not it's the rhythm. It's the up and down. So what am I doing? It's that kind of thing.
I want to ask you, with all of the performing that you've done, and with all of these life experiences that you've had,
Yeah.
what is the one thing that has surprised you the most?
Oh Lord. Well, I guess getting in that first play, I couldn't believe it. And when we came to the next to last rehearsal, he went around the room and told each of us something we had to work on, and I was devastated. I thought I was so horrible. I was practically in tears. At the end, I said to him, "Could I leave early?" He said, "Barbara, I auditioned 25 people. I picked you." I went, "Oh." His name is Mike Sinigliaro. You might have seen him. He's
Oh, yes. And with everything that has happened since you have come into the world of cabaret, and let's exclude the past year because we're not going to put that in the equation, but what is the one thing that you've loved the most as far as change is concerned? And what is the one thing that you've resisted the most?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not sure I know what you mean as far as change is concerned. And so,
Well, there have been a lot of changes in cabaret. Some rooms have come and gone.
Oh. I never thought of it this way before. Thing I most like is that. God, I really love cabaret, and so it's hard to say. I love the contact with the audience, which you don't get. I'm forgetting everybody's name now. See, I'm 86 years old.
Well, I'm right there with you.
Montgomery. Her last name was Montgomery. Carolyn Montgomery. When she was doing the Den, oh, I loved it. Every
me
Saturday
too.
night. It was
Yeah.
so good. And the atmosphere of that was so great. So we're in a small room. We have Jeff Corbett on piano. We have her there. And oh, I loved that. I love that.
It was
So
great.
I think I like that small atmosphere. In fact, at Don't Tell Mama, I used to like the big room. And one time it wasn't available. And as soon as I went in the smaller room, I never wanted to go back to the big room again.
Well, the one thing that I've learned about you today, among many other things, is that your adaptability and the fact that you're adapting to whatever the situation is, you're there. I can't believe this, but we are at the end of our first show.
Oh my God, yes.
It just flew. This is you kicked off 2021 for me, and I couldn't be more thrilled about that.
Well, thank you. I want to add something because you just said something that's perfect.
Okay.
When I was 15, I read The Life of Saint Therese, who was the little flower. And her father was a wealthy businessman who, when he came home, he would bring trinkets for his children, his five daughters to pick. And he always started with the oldest girl. This one time he decided to start with Therese. She looked at the box and said, I choose everything. Now, years later, when I was in therapy, I said to the therapist, oh my God, I think I know where I got this. I think I got it from her. Choose everything.
That's
and
wonderful. Well, again, I love you. I want to thank you for everything that you do in the community. Not only are you a great entertainer, and you are a great entertainer because it's always about the audience for you, but you also are so supportive of people in the cabaret community, and you're there for the open mics. You're there for everyone. So I applaud you. I thank you for this. I want to thank everybody who tuned in today. I hope that you enjoyed today's show. If you did, and if you haven't done so already, please go to my website and sign my guest book with your thoughts about the show. That helps to boost me in other markets. I do want to tell you about tomorrow's show. I'm going to be interviewing Dave McGee, also known as Dr. Moo Moo. And let me tell you, he was brought to my attention by Deborah Stone. And what he has been doing for many, many years is he puts a bandana on, he goes around in Oklahoma where he lives, and he gives $100 bills out to homeless people. And he is such an inspiration. And his story is so amazing. Please tune in tomorrow at 3:00 if you can. It's going to be an amazing interview. I'm looking forward to that. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Today, everybody who's watching or listening on the podcast later, please go to your Facebook friends list, go to the second name that pops up, and reach out to them and let them know what they mean to you. Not with a text or an email or an instant message, but a phone call. Now, before we end the show, Barbara, I want to give you the final word, and you're kicking off 2021 with us. Any message, if there's anything that we talked about that you want to expound upon, or anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone listening right now, the stage is yours. And again, thank you for being here today.
There probably are other things that I could say, but right now what I want to say is music is almost everything. If every culture, every people has it, and when there are bad days, if you can sing or if you can put on your favorite CDs, something just happens and it just lifts your spirit. And I think now we need it more than ever. And a song I would recommend is John Lennon's Imagine, which he wrote in 1971, just before the Vietnam War ended. Before that, he did the Christmas one in that same year, but Imagine is even better. And I put it on Facebook today. Everybody who loves music and who loves America should sing that song every single day, at least up until the inauguration, but even after. And let's like We Shall Overcome became like a national anthem, and I think Imagine should become like It's so beautiful. People living together as brothers and sisters without grasping for profit and all that. And hate, random hate. I can't even fathom it. I think it's just the most horrible sin.
Now, before we do sign off, where can people hear you sing next?
Oh, sing that next. Oh,
Sing that for you.
Natasha Castillo's virtual open mic, which is called Spotlight on You. 1 week it's on Sunday, and 1 week on Friday, and 1 week it's on Tuesday, and I think the next one is Sunday.
Will you post the information on my timeline?
Oh, yeah, I will. I'll do that.
Share it with everyone.
From 7 to 9, and she's done a wonderful job of creating a community of people who feel like friends, even if they never knew each other before.
Great. Well,
So,
Barb,
and I'll give Paul McKee's too, because those two have just created a community. So, okay, I'll send that to you when I get off here. Thank you so much.
Happy New Year.
Do you believe I was nervous before this?
No need to be nervous.
Okay.
Happy New Year, Barbara. I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you.